Okay, this is this month's business book club, and we're doing The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz started a couple of different startups that had some pretty severe challenges to them before they eventually sold for, $1.7 billion or some change. And then he used his portion of that sale, and along with Mark Andreesen, who started Netflix, which Ben Horowitz also worked at, they started a venture capital fund called A to Z, which is Andreessen Horowitz Venture Capital, or A16Z. And then they had a lot of experience helping other people start organizations and lead startups into becoming bigger or maybe even failing. And he decided to write a book, and that book was to help people who are in the startup community avoid what he saw as very common mistakes, and to help teach them how to lower their risk and increase their chance to succeed, and maybe give them guidance. And look, right out of the gate, you guys, Scott and I are in a startup that has had some hard times, and we've had funding issues, we've had issues finding our customer, we've had issues building the right thing. We've had some things we wish we had done differently. And look, last month we talked about Naval Ravikant, and I told you I loved that book. This book, I really felt like this book was written for me today. And I devoured every single page of it. And I thought he was exactly what I needed to read. And I'm talking so effusively about last month's book and this month's book. I don't want you to think that I like business books, because traditionally I don't like them. I think they're poorly written, or I think they're poorly researched, or I think a lot of them are just anecdotal, or I think they're repetitive. But man, I loved this book, and I just thought it was the greatest. And I learned so much from it. And I can't wait to share with you some of the things that really stood out to me. Okay. What'd you guys think? Now that go after that.
Well,
Tell me
I
you
think,
hated it after
well, no,
that.
I think the title leaves something to be desired. Like the title is, it sounds almost dirty. If Chantal were reading it, I'd tell her to put that trash away.
the,
Uh,
the dirty.
it does.
Dirty.
It sounds horrible. Hard thing about hard things. Okay. But I did also think that the book was like written, it was apropos for me at the time, because of the same issues that you were talking about in the startup, going through hard things.
Hard thing about hard
And
things.
yeah, exactly. And he was calling out what makes the situation difficult, and things to do to fix it. So I thought it was very apropos.
Yeah, what'd you think, Jorge?
I think Ben Horowitz is funnier than shit. Like he has very good comedic timing. When I was reading it, you guys obviously have experience when it comes to like building businesses. Obviously, I'm a student, I have no experience, but it puts you through all these emotions of like high points, like right when you think you're going to succeed. And then all of a sudden, something drastically goes wrong. Like, for example, in the book, he talks about like 9/11, the dot-com bubble, all like these crazy times that I obviously I don't really remember because I was 1 year old, 2 years old. So um, his ability to navigate through all that was really awesome. But his ability to tell the stories is really funny. And I enjoyed that about the book.
Yeah, that's why you were able to get through the whole book. It
Yeah.
wasn't just that it was apropos or whatever, that it was speaking to us at the time. It's that it was well written, and written from the point of view of a story. And as we all know from success, what is it? Made to stick. Stories are sticky, right? And so it's easy to read your morals as long as they're couched in a story. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Did you guys finish the book?
Yep.
Yeah.
You did?
Finished it
Okay, me too.
yesterday. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. The last few
Yeah.
chapters I feel like is where
Yeah.
it was not stressful, but that's where like all the juicy stuff was. Like midway to the end is when I thought it was a fantastic read.
Yeah. It was drier, I would say. That's the word I would use, right? It's the stuff at the end was drier and less storytelling, less anecdotal, right? More like, do this, don't do that, you know?
I'll too.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the part you mentioned him being funny, Jorge, and I remember cracking up at this one part, and I wrote my buddy Eric about it. And now I can't find the message, but I do remember like cracking up, and now I feel bad. I can't remember the part. Maybe I'll remember it later.
Yeah,
Um,
I also remember laughing several times, but I was reading it electronically, and you know, to highlight, it kind of interrupts your flow, right? You're reading, you laugh, and then to highlight, you have to like hold it down, drag it over, release, say something about it, and then, you know, like it. I didn't find myself highlighting the stuff that was funny, just like the stuff that was like, oh my gosh, I've got to remember this.
yeah, yeah. Darn it. Well, I'll have to look it up. Okay, so can I tell you the best thing I learned from the book? I do know the best thing I
Sure.
think I learned, and it's that it's anybody can have a dream, and a few people can execute on the dream, but it takes someone special when that dream goes completely blown to gather their courage and do the right thing and communicate to everybody involved and make sure that everybody understands what's gone wrong and understands that we're strategizing on where to go from here and dealing with it like that. He didn't say that in so many words, but he said story after story after story that reminded me like it's easy to dream, but it's very hard to lead when things are headed to disaster.
Yeah.
And I really, really appreciated that. The other thing I appreciated, is Scott and I have talked about leadership and leading our own companies. He basically says the only thing that prepares you to run a company is running a company. And there's no MBAs or training or consultants or anything like that can help you run a company better than just running the company. And I, you know, I'm reading these books. I think this book has prepared me. Like I think maybe he's not quite right about that, but I definitely am grateful for him to say there's no great CEO school. There's no great thing that at the end of it, now you're a CEO. Like you still have a lot to learn by being a CEO.
I
And
think that's what he said was like CEOs are made, not born. And that was a misconception that I originally held. I thought it was just like you're an individual that's born to lead, but he gave some examples of just stepping up, including himself. When he first got in, he was like, I don't know if I'm built for this. And that was something that was almost
I don't,
calming. Yeah.
it was calming. Yeah. If,
Yeah.
if somebody who's kind of known for leadership has these feelings of self-doubt and wondering what they're going to do next and if they're doing the right thing. And then he still says it's okay to not know what you're going to do next. It is not okay to let everybody else know that you don't know what you're going to
Yeah.
do next.
Yeah. Yeah. The something similar to that he said, I was trying to find the quote. I was like, I think I highlighted something about that too. He said, what makes people want to follow a leader? 3 key traits: the ability to articulate a vision. He calls it the right kind of ambition, which is really ambition for the people under you more than yourself, right? So caring more about your employees than you do your own self. And then the last one is the ability to achieve the vision. In other words, competence. And most people, when they think of CEOs, they only think about that last bullet,
Right.
competence, right? But he says the first 2 are actually as important, if not more important, than the last one, right?
I really
And a
like that.
lot of CEOs miss the second bullet, right? Caring more about their employees than they do themselves, right?
I really, really like that. And actually that part, and I don't mean to brag, but that part I was grateful for because for me, it's easy for me to care about other people. I easily like and worry about other people and empathize with them and want them to be better. And I see a lot of examples of CEOs that look like they're sociopaths, that
Yeah.
look like they have a complete lack of care for other people. And so
Yeah.
when he wrote that, I said, "Oh, hey, that's great to hear." Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
what about you, Jorge? What's something you learned from this?
There was a quote, and this is actually one of the quotes that made me laugh, was I forget who said it, but I believe it was to Ben. He goes, "If you're going to eat shit,
Oh yeah.
don't nibble." I
Oh,
thought that was a fantastic quote, and pretty much saying like, if you have a super tough decision, don't drag it out and avoid the pain
Yeah.
you're gonna face. And I think that's a perfect thing for just life. Like,
oh
if you know
man,
something's going to shit, like you
Ike
might as
has
well just
already
fucking.
used that quote. Like
I've already used
in
it in
outside.
meetings, in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
big meeting. Yeah, yeah. But basically, like, and he uses examples. He's like, if you have to restate earnings, right? The example he used is if you have to restate earnings, do you like restate them with an optimist? Like, okay, we're restating, but it's going to get better. Or do you just go all in and say, look, we really made a big mistake and we have to really readjust. And now everybody knows the truth. And then if we exceed that, we've done better, as opposed to like a slow, like, we did worse. Oh my God, it's worse than we thought. Oh my God, it's even worse, right? So yeah, if you have to eat shit, don't nibble. Like, tell the truth and go all in on what the truth is and what it means to everybody involved.
Almost pessimistically. Yeah.
Right.
Like even if it is the truth, like we missed it by this amount, but we know that it's going to go down in the future. Don't even worry about that. Just say, yeah, it's all the way at the bottom.
Yeah,
It's
We've,
yeah,
fucked.
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I
Well,
also love that fucked. What was it? WIFO.
Yeah.
Wifio. Yeah,
Yeah,
Wifio.
with
That was
you.
it. Yeah. He goes, Scott Weiss relayed that it's so common, there's an acronym for it. Wifio, which stands for "We're fucked, it's over." Like, "We're fucked, it's over" happens so often to CEOs that they have an acronym for it. That was really cool.
So on the Jorge one, if you have to eat shit, don't nibble, like, hand in hand with that lesson, I learned two other things. One is he said, what hard conversation am I having that am I avoiding that will make my life better? Right? Like, didn't he say that? Was that this or Naval Ravikant? Am I confusing the two?
No, wait, I have that. I have what you're talking about. Well, I don't know. Page 51. All I highlighted was I inserted an agenda item. What are we not doing?
Oh
Like
yeah.
not what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, but what are we not doing? Like, what are we completely missing by talking about all this other stuff? Anyway,
Right. But
that was kind of the closest I see here, but I'm not
well,
sure if that's exactly what you're talking about.
not really, but
Yeah.
I'll go back to the other thing that I do know he said, which is when things go wrong, tell the truth. Because if you don't tell the truth, you will erode trust. And people only follow you because they trust you. So if you tell them half truths or you lie to them or you do anything that can, lead them to believe that, you are manipulating them. He was very big on don't manipulate them. He also talked about the shit sandwich, like compliment, criticize, compliment, and a lot of managers do that. He said that's manipulative. Like, don't manipulate them. If you have feedback to give, you give the feedback. And if you have a culture where you give feedback without being personal and without getting angry or emotional, then what you'll do is you'll create a culture where everybody gives feedback to everybody, and it's just the natural thing that everybody does. And I think that stems from, like, what Jorge said, if you have to eat shit, don't nibble. Well, then tell the truth. Like, you would, a way to nibble is just to kind of lead them down a path you want them to go down, but you don't need to do that. You can just tell the truth and let them assess for themselves. And same with employees, tell the truth. If you lie, you ruin trust. And if you ruin trust, they're not going to like working for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really like
He
that.
said that once you lose trust, it's very, very difficult to get back, especially with employees. One thing that I wasn't aware of was when he was talking about firing employees versus like firing other executives. And if you're extremely rude and brash with employees, other employees are going to see that and be like, shit, am I next? Or that was difficult to watch. Like I might just plan for an exit or pivot my own. And when you're dealing with executives, you almost just want to be like straightforward with them. Like there's no shit sandwich for executives. You just be like, it's not working out, and they're already used to it. So that was one thing I wasn't familiar with or wasn't aware of. That was pretty educational.
Yeah, I really like that. Um, I yeah, I really did like that. Okay, so another thing I really liked, and probably my favorite chapter of the whole book, was when he outlined what a good product manager does. He said,
I have several tidbits on there. So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, a good product. One thing that, because I want to be a good product manager, like it was really good for me. So Jorge, what a product manager does is they give the engineering team exact instructions on what to build, so there's no
Mhm.
ambiguity, and so the engineering team understands what and why they're building it and what's important about it and what is really critical. So that once you've got documentation that outlines this, you can use that when you communicate with marketing or sales or customers or whoever else you need to communicate with. And you know, I contribute to some products that Scott is working on, and I hope to contribute more to that. And I've been worried about being undertrained for that. But when he outlined in that chapter, I was like, oh, this is great. Like I can follow these examples. And one thing I really knew is they produce tons of written material that people can refer to. They don't just say something, because when you say something, people remember different things about what you said. What they do is they write it down and they say, this is what I meant exactly, and this is what I expect to have happen. And then they crisply define their target. They create facts, presentations, white papers. They take written positions on important issues. So it's very easy to be waffly. Like if a product can go this way or that way, if you tell them to go that way and it's wrong, that's dangerous, right? You've just told them to go someplace that might not be the right place to go. And there's a temptation to be like, let's make that decision as a group, right? But he was very clear. He's like, you do not let engineering build whatever they want. Like you're responsible to point engineering in the right direction, and that risk is on you. You know,
Yeah.
you're taking that
But
risk.
he
Um,
also said, don't let the customer do it, which I
yeah,
thought
or
was
marketing,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
or
Or yeah. So
or your competition,
yeah,
right?
customers. So like a lot of people say, well, we'll just put something out there and we'll get customer feedback and then we'll, improve the product over time. Right. But he said, see, I have a quote 49, page 49. Turns out that this is exactly what product strategy is all about. Figuring out the right product is the innovator's job, not the customer's job. The customer only knows what he or she thinks based on her experience with the current product, right? And doesn't know this is the way it should go forward, right? Like,
Right,
yeah. Anyway,
right.
I thought that was interesting.
Yep, yep. Um, by the way, Jorge, so Scott and I, obviously this resonated a lot with us because we build software products and we're in a startup and we're probably going to be in this situation a lot. Did it resonate with you? Like, were you like, how do you feel about a startup life after reading this book?
It's terrifying, dude. I'm gonna pray for both of y'all. Like
Yes,
just
it
some of the
is.
shit that they go
Yeah.
through. He was talking about like having the feeling of like you want to spit up blood, or that constant feeling like your stomach. And my mom, she's a business owner, so I talked to her. I would like bring up stuff about this, and obviously much smaller scale, maybe like 10 employees, and um, yeah, she was like, yeah, the sleepless nights, it's the worst. And imagine like the scale of thousands of employees is like, I can't even imagine. It just feels horrendous. So
Did
it inspired
you
me
talk
and
to your
scared
mom
me.
about this book?
Oh yeah, I talked to her pretty much about like even the last book. She loves like learning about business stuff. She actually wants to read this book. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that I was telling her about, She was like, I learned through a lot of trials and tribulations, and it's just a continuous learning experience being a business owner. And yeah, I thought that was very inspirational. Very scary though. Very scary.
It
So
is.
can I tell you two things that he changed my mind on? That
That's interesting.
yeah, that I thought one way about it, and now I think another way about it. The first one is he said train your people. Like, you
Hmm.
know, I've always felt like it was their responsibility to train themselves. It's their job. Like it's your career. I train myself, you train yourself, right? And after reading all that he wrote about training and about and how effective it was for them. And he was training engineers.
Hmm.
Like he wasn't just training like male people or something. He was training professionals about what he wanted, and he was training managers about what he wanted. And one of the things he was training them about was to do one-on-ones. And
Yeah.
I've always hated one-on-ones.
Me too.
And I thought
Yep.
one-on-ones were a waste of time. But when I read what he said about a one-on-one, so to be clear, a one-on-one is a leader meeting with one employee to talk to that one employee. And what I loved about it is he said, let them set the agenda. They come in with what they want to talk about. And two, your job is to listen.
Yeah.
Just listen, right? And
Uh, I have that quote. Um, During the meeting, since it's the employees meeting, the manager should do 10% of the talking and 90% of the listening. Note that this is the opposite of most one-on-ones.
I really like that. And I really see the value in that. And I intend to implement that with all of our employees to maybe not weekly or monthly, but on a specific cadence, meet with every single one of them and listen and hear what they have to say.
Speaking of getting your mind changed, I actually, after reading, it was somewhere around 107. I was looking at my highlights. I don't know exactly where it was, but um, it was somewhere around that because he's talking about job expectations. I actually wrote software engineering position descriptions because he said that's one of the things you should have. Like you should be everybody should be referring to this is what my job is, as part of what you were talking about with the training,
Yeah.
right? You this is what my job is. And so I've communicated a lot of stuff, like verbally to people, like, hey, as a software engineer, you need to be committing at least once a day. Hey, you need to be communicating at least twice a day. Fine if one of those is the stand up in the morning, but before you leave, you also need to communicate again. And that can be through a commit, but you have to do that end of day communication, right? And I've said those things out loud many, 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 many times, but I've never written it down. And that's one of the things he says you should have written down. This is your job description, similar to the training thing.
I really like that. I really like that.
Yeah.
This is also interesting. I don't have very many opinions as far as like obviously handling employees because I'm so young, but a lot of learning experiences through this book. Like one of my favorite people in this like in this entire book is Mark Cranny. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
you guys remember. That guy's
Oh yeah.
fucking hilarious. I have a quote
Yeah.
here. I was trying to find it. It says Mark Cranny walks up to the podium and looks at the crowd of fresh new recruits and says, "I don't give a fuck how well trained you are. If you don't bring me $500,000 a quarter, I'm putting a bullet in your
Yeah.
head."
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, this guy's a
Yeah.
fucking savage. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're going to war, like that whole peacetime, wartime CEO discussion
Oh
that he
yeah.
talks about, dude, that was a powerful, like when there's time to go to war, like Steve Jobs, maybe during a peacetime, he wasn't the greatest CEO, but when Apple was like weeks away from failure and Steve Jobs comes in there and just starts tearing shit up, like that was a really cool example that I had no idea.
I read that part and I realized one of the things that I think makes Scott and I good partners is I feel like I'm a very good wartime CEO. Like when change is needed, I'm going to change every fucking thing until I figure out what's wrong. And Scott's a very good peacetime CEO. Like, we need to be efficient. We need a process for this. We can't be this immature. We need to figure this out, and we need to understand what we're saying here, what we're going to do in the future. Like, so I'm drastic action, nothing sacred. I'll hear all ideas, and Scott's much more methodical and thoughtful.
It's very true.
Yeah.
The guy with the pink polo is very war CEO.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wouldn't be able to take that. The guy in the pink polo tell me to figure it the fuck out. I'd be like, oh yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know me when I'm having fun and relaxed, but when I'm stressed, I can yell. I can,
I've heard
Scott will
stories.
tell you I can get upset.
Yes, absolutely true.
Um, okay, so I don't know. Are we done here? Do we have any other thoughts that we wanted to share on this?
Let me just go through. So he talks about the importance of prioritization, which I've been a fan of forever. I think it's like one of the single biggest things that a project manager or a program manager or any type of manager can do.
Or leader
Yeah,
and
any
he
leader.
says that even
Yeah.
about yourself. He says,
Yeah.
focus on what really matters.
Yeah.
And it does take a risky and astute and observant mind to understand what really matters. Like, this is the important thing to deliver, and we have to deliver.
There was
it right.
overlap there with Naval Ravikant, I think.
Right.
And then another one. This was maybe insider a little bit, but I highlighted page 123. Content-free executives have no value in startups. Every executive must understand the product and the technology and the customers and the market.
Doing everything.
Yeah. And I felt like, oh yeah, that is so true.
And I've been telling you this for about 6 months.
Yeah.
That somebody needs a clear vision and a dictatorial attitude.
Yeah. But he also, like, just a couple pages later, he says, the more experience you have, the more you realize that there's something seriously wrong with every employee in your company, including you. Nobody's perfect. So, like,
I really, really like that story where he was in the board meeting and the board said, when are you going to hire a real CEO?
oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
And he said this
that was insane.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh my, I was like, how do you respond to something like that? Like, you
in
dick,
front of his fucking face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what an asshole.
Yeah. But he handled it humbly, right? He was kind of clear at several points in the book, like, I recognize I'm going to make mistakes, and I recognize I'm learning, and I recognize that not everything I do is going to be perfect. Like, that kind of humility was really endearing to me. Like, I would be like, well, I can see why your people follow you.
Yeah. Actually, didn't what's his name? Jim Collins. He also said that in, I can't remember if it was Good to Great or the other one, but where he's talking about one of the most common characteristics of great CEOs is their humility. And I think it kind of went along with this one, the right kind of ambition, caring more about your employees than they do themselves. Those are very similarly, similar attitudes, I guess. So, but you hear about anyway, hundreds of CEOs that obviously that's not the case, right?
Like an egotistical asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Like that guy that asked that question in that boardroom, like, like that is, I understand that the question needs to be discussed, but asking it in that way is like red flag against that guy.
I do have a criticism of the book.
Okay, go for it.
The last part where he talks about Andreesen Horowitz was by far the most interesting part to me. And I wanted that to be half the book. Like, I wanted him to.
I disagree. I think it got drier at the end. That's what I was saying earlier.
Oh,
Like
I
it
like
had
that
more
part.
like do this, don't do that, whatever type stuff. But
Yeah.
you know,
The part I liked about that was when he said what we look for in CEOs is we want them to have passion for their product and for their business. And they're not there for the money or for the exit or for the liquidity event. They're there because they really believe in their product's position in the marketplace and what its potential is. And Naval said something similar. And then Charlie Munger, who died this week, who was partners with Warren Buffett, was on a YouTube interview, and he goes on a 15-minute rant about that. He says over and over again, um, we really want people are motivated by money. Like if we see a business we want, we find out what motivates the CEO, and if the CEO is motivated by money, we give him money, and then we exit him. But if he's motivated by his passion to the product or what they're building and the roadmap and future he sees and his employees, and you can tell that he just loves that business, well, then we leave him in charge and we give him whatever he wants to stay in charge because we're not going to be able to replace him. Like we'll never be able to hire somebody that believes the way he believes. So we would rather just invest in that person. Then then there's the third type where they love business. They don't necessarily love their business, but they love business in general. He's like, we can work with them too, but we might just move what business they're in charge of. If they just love business in general, they just want to be in the game, we'll find a way to put them in the game. But he's like, it's really important to understand which of the three types of CEOs you're acquiring so that you know where to put them. And yeah, the ones motivated by money, they just get ejected. They don't like to work with them. Yeah.
No, they'll sell whatever they could sell.
Yeah.
Like my key takeaway when it came to like being a good CEO is no matter what decision you make, just like back yourself. Like if the board is telling you like all these different opinions, you have to have the strength to really just keep everybody else's interests in mind and just make the best decision for the company at that point, even if it means going against your board. And that's something like just having the fucking balls to do something that is a very difficult decision is really cool. And he said that it's cool to cuss. Like it's chill to
Oh,
cuss. That was my favorite part of the book. I've been telling my
oh,
mom that for like years.
Ike is a
oh,
huge cusser.
oh. And here's why. So the story he tells in the book about cussing is um, he says people got offended by the swearing in HR. And I realized when they issued the HR request, it was me they were talking about because I swore a lot. And then they do this analysis and he finds out that everybody at Microsoft swears, Amazon and Facebook, that they're very high profile swearing. So if I outlaw swearing, I might hurt my recruiting efforts from people who swear at the other big tech companies. And then they finally arrive after this long effort on a policy that says you can swear, but you can't swear to sexually harass, to abuse, to intimidate. Like you're not, but you're really not allowed to use any language to do that, swearing
Yeah.
or not,
Yeah.
right? Just
Cupcake.
yeah,
He uses
cupcake.
the
Yeah,
cupcake. Yeah.
right,
So it's totally
Okay.
fine to say thank you
right,
for these cupcakes, but it's not okay to say you're looking good, cupcake.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So here's my story, Jorge, about that. So I was working at the kind of beginnings of Microsoft Consulting. It was a different company back then in the 90s, but it was a Microsoft arm for consulting. And we were considered the top consultants in the country. And they hired me when I was really young, like 23, but I was really good at this one thing that they wanted, right? So when I was working on my first projects, my manager, and by the way, I felt like I was underqualified the entire time. Like I felt like I had no business being there. So I was really nervous and all the time, right? And my manager says, "Hey, Ellis, I understand. I noticed something. How come you don't swear?" And I said, "What?" And he's like, "I want to know, you never swear. How come you don't swear?" And I said, "Because my mother loved me." You know, and 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 he looked at me and he says, all great developers swear. And I was I was so worried about being a great developer that that's the day I started swearing. And I just started swearing all the time because this guy who I thought was the smartest guy on the planet was using that to judge me. So I just started swearing like crazy ever since.
I don't know that you can use that to judge anyone. I think that's just like a upbringing sort of thing. You know, some people are brought up in a more
I
religious
agree now.
upbringing.
I
Yeah.
agree now, but at the time,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you know what? He's right. Everybody around here is cussing like crazy. You know,
Yeah.
what motherfucker made this mistake? You know, or whatever. I was like,
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So another great one. So what's next?
oh, thank you, by the way. I'm going to take that as a compliment because I chose the last two.